Welcome back to the channel, everybody. And today I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine from further up in the world, in the UK. I've got with me N from the Rebel Foundry, and he actually is someone that I've stumbled upon, well, I'd say, a little under a year ago, because he's someone that has actually been a subscriber to my own channel, and he actually looks at the organic portal hypotheses from more of a scientific viewpoint in his own way. And I thought I'd bring him on to just get to know him a little bit more and help to promote his own uh, awareness on his channel. And yeah, thanks for joining me today, En.
Thank you, I appreciate it. That's
Yeah. And how are things going up there for you at the moment with everything going on?
Well, for me, I would say I've been socially isolating most of my
Yeah.
life. So, this doesn't really make too much of a difference to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
From my direct experience, it's just the same old. But yeah, supposedly we've gone into a second lockdown.
Yeah.
Just more tyranny, more
Right.
legislative statutes and police not standing common law, and yeah, it's just a mess really. But this is where they want to take us.
Yeah, and it just, I guess, from what I've seen, it just seems like things have ramped up more up in the UK and especially Ireland. They just seem to be utilizing the people to police each other much more, especially on social media as well. So that's a bit of a thing to worry about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I've always, when I started becoming aware of this whole thing 4 years ago, I kind of felt like the people around me were dangerous to be around, not because of what they were doing just then, but just because I kind of understood that their mindset sort of allows them to be used as tools for tyranny. So I could put them into like Nazi Germany, and they'll be Nazis just the same way. So this doesn't surprise me, but it's like now it's kind of reached a point where I've got to like we all need to sort of defend ourselves against uh, you know the order followers and tyranny rolling out.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just start with a few questions. The first question I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, I'm just curious, what do you think would be the catalyst for you coming into awareness just in your own personal life and for, the external world around you, as well as your own internal growth and change?
Yeah, sure. So it's a bit of a weird one. I mean, I think we all come into this place as a blank slate, and
Yep.
like our minds get wiped if the whole reincarnation thing is actually a thing, and we sort of like don't have any reference points to anything. So yeah, I just like everyone else took on the programming. Still do to some extent because using the English language as confined as that is, but I sort of understood that there's society as it exists now. The whole 9 to 5 thing, then get a house and get a car and have kids. The whole script as it appeared. But I kind of felt when I was growing up that there was, it kind of seemed a bit confined to me. I thought, is this it? There's got to be like more, you know what I mean? There's got to be more to it than this. So I kind of felt, but I thought everyone was like me. I thought that people generally got that there was reality as it exists now, but we were sort of, I felt that society was trying to move towards something. I don't really know how to say it, but you could say transcendental, but
Right.
I guess it's not as literal as that. There's something there's an attractor that we should be like headed towards. So yeah, like I felt like that was the intention of
Yeah.
other people that was already in place. So I went into I got brought into the whole schooling system and went into studied like engineering at university, thinking that like society has its values and morals in place. That has to be it. Like why else? People just can't submit to this mundane thing that we have going on now. Surely we're trying to make things better. So I thought, I could just become a technologist and try and improve society that way. But then slowly down the line, I realised that all of the advertisements regarding how great professions are and how sort of well established society is, I realised a lot of it was just lies, or people just trying to sell you things, and everything was two-faced, and there's a lot of shadow projection, things like that. And that was the first thing that kind of got me. Sort of like people just try, and also I realised people weren't very honest with themselves, so
Right.
they would often like to bury their problems behind a bunch of assumptions, and people were building their entire worldviews based on assumptions, and those assumptions suspended like a paradigm of lies, but they bounced that off of themselves, and they confounded like the truth of the group. But, and I had no choice but to be involved in that because I didn't have any other reference points.
Right.
But, yeah.
So kind of like people were hiding behind a false facade, like a pseudo self, I think maybe might be a good way to put it.
Yeah, and I had to do that too because like I had no other option. But there was always something observing, which I now know is my real self. That was actually just watching this construct in my own mind being created, which I guess people might call that the ego. But and it just seemed ridiculous to me. It was just like, what is this thing that just and this thing is like trying to say that it's like the sole like arbiter of reality. This thing knows all that is, all that can be, and all that ever will be.
Right.
And it's just slowly you start to discover certain things about principles and laws about this reality that is both horrifying but also kind of freeing at the same time. Because I kind of go off this thing whereby sort of reality is generated based on decision making, but that's also based on the quality of the information you take in. So a lot of these people were having their minds given to them like purposefully for the reason of having to make bad decisions and generate behavior that was sort of in contradiction to the actual objective laws that govern this place. I think the main thing that brought me out of it was because I had an awareness of this whole concept of ego, but I never quite took it seriously because I just didn't quite have an experience that dissolved me of that. I took my first sort of reality shattering experiences when I took LSD when I was at uni, and
right.
I got very visceral, like outside of language connection to certain principles like duality. It was like all of a sudden, love and hate or rough and smooth. It was like all into one thing. So that gave me a reference point to which I started to take my intuition seriously.
Okay. So you think that you'd probably say that you kind of were sort of born into realizing that things were just not as they were, and then once you got to that point in your life in uni, that's when kind of it sort of just hit a particular focal point and it accelerated. Would that be safe to say?
Yeah, it's kind of like you start gaining new points of references to actually
Right.
see reality in a different way. But
Yeah.
and a lot of it came from pain as well.
Yeah.
Like I didn't quite fit in with my peers. I was the sort of person who wanted to talk about like whether aliens existed and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But yeah, like a lot of people for some reason were buying into these contracts. There's all these materialistic contracts that they try to hook us with, and I
Sure.
could see that they were. See, this is why I feel like reincarnation has some kind of it's an important topic because I can't explain why I intuitively knew that sort of the materialistic game was a con basically because I was very young at the time and I didn't have the experience of submerging myself within it, but I kind of knew that it was kind of like a trick being pulled over me.
Mm.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a mixture of like pain and also just curiosity about this place, this strange
Yeah.
place.
Mm. Awesome. Yeah, I can relate to the pain for sure, and I know that a lot of soul travelers can as well. So yeah, no, that's great. I have another question, if you don't mind. Which
Yeah,
changes in your life did you notice the most during your progression on that path forward? If you had a way of, discussing that.
yeah. Well, it definitely having this awareness definitely
Mm.
changes the way you interact with those who are solidified in that egoic construct, or some people call it like demiurge or Mutiko, is this like hive mind sort of collective egregore sort of thing.
Yep.
Um, I definitely because I feel like everything's a frequency. So if
Right.
they're resonating a certain frequency, a certain number of memes, and they have a certain amount of information that's been given to them, to which and it's kind of like that. What they are is this. It's like a house of cards, and it's so fragile, it's so flimsy that you can just knock over one of the foundations, and the whole thing comes crumbling. So then they have like this thing has a self-defense mechanism. That's where the gaslighting comes in, and
Mm.
the ridicule. But we all know about that. But yeah, like the so like that's one of the big changes is that when frequencies misalign, then there's some destructive interference, like in terms of like physics talk, like they cancel out, and then you kind of get nothing. Whereas if you're resonating with like minds, then
Mm.
there's a constructive interference. So like the wave gets amplified. So I just find it's very difficult to speak about, to go down to their level, because unfortunately I still have to
Yeah.
engage with the
Yeah.
progressive system. I
Yeah.
mean, we all do, and it's just hell sometimes because you can be sort of you can be respectful to them, and respect people's natural law boundaries as a
Mm.
moral being, but they I there's this two faces to it where they can kind of trick themselves into thinking that they're good people. One, because they don't have a reference point to objective morality, and two, because they share the same problems.
Right.
So it's kind of like they would make it appear that they can fit in with themselves, and really it's just kind of like a fear mechanism. So if they say that, I see this all the time with my boss, like he says he really cares about people, but then when you try to dig down a little bit deeper into what he really means by that, he's only really talking about with reference to the memes of the hive mind and supposed care that's been handed down to them by the controllers who creates these values. So yes, the big changes, I guess, is that it's just bloody hard to talk to people.
Yeah.
Because you're operating at a different level.
Right. Yeah. I have noticed that, like one of the big things, even I would say, even from the last few years, just everyone is so scripted. Like everything they say is just the same. It's sort of just generic, mundane, yeah, I've heard it before type thing, even talking to someone that, let's say just unconsciously supports the system, they have the same kind of like statements they'll say here and there. Like even you see it online, I've seen it so many times, and I think, is that person for real? And I think, well, they're actually stating it, like, especially when it comes to people like myself who, you know, let's just use the term an an anarchist. Uh, I see other people that are in the same kind of uh, train of thought, but they get people saying to them like, if you don't like it in this country, then why don't you move to Somalia? And I've actually seen people, no joke, comment that. And I think, wow, that actually exists. I thought that was just a meme, but it's for real. Like it's so scripted. So yeah, I get that. If that's sort of any
Yeah,
connection to what you might be saying, you just cannot talk to certain people because they don't have that individual thought pattern.
yeah, and I think a lot of the times when in my relations with people, I try to pry out something that's unique about them, something that isn't just, like this
Right.
collective thing that's been handed to them.
Yep.
But I think the reason why these memes and stereotypes about uh, like program people keep coming up is because, like, I think from their vantage point, they're a lot of the times they're operating on the base nature of the human form, and um, like going into like holistic psychology, like
Mm-hmm.
doing stuff like it's all sort of based on archetypes and like in the collective unconscious. And I think that there's definitely an archetype for evil, which is what you could arguably assign to this demiurge
Sure. Yep. Yep.
we've defined.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. It's like it is very difficult to sort of mingle with them. I generally just try to keep conversations short because
Right.
I guess like it's all about energy as well, isn't it? So they're uh, you've got to ask what is their purpose. So it's sort of and by the way, like when we talk about organic portals or NPCs, it's not to say that they are entirely that. I just think that this hive mind thing is an aspect of human nature. Like I experience it within myself because to say that it's people out there is to is a shadow projection because um, I'm not owning that within myself. So
Right. Yeah. So it's
yeah,
kind of like we all, in a way, even soul travelers, we have that capability of falling into that programming as well. But um, it seems that almost like some of them, or maybe, it could be argued most other people seem to fall in line much quicker, much deeper.
yeah. Um, and I think about that a lot, and because I've got to ask myself like, how was it that we were able to break free, given that you know, we were put under the same conditions, under the
Mm-hmm.
same system.
Yeah.
So what is it about us that's different? And I'm not saying that like any of us are any better than them. It's just sort of the way it is. It's the way things have turned out. But like what that always brings me back to this reincarnation theory, you know, because it sort of makes
Mm.
sense that, you know, like, energy can only be like transferred. It can never be like created or destroyed. Um, so you know, like if you know, when you die, then a certain resonance of thought patterns and emotions is a kind of energy as like permutations of electrical signals within the brain, like neuropeptides, etc., from a
Right.
materialistic point of view. But um, like whatever that is, if you're unprepared for the hyperdimensional space, then you just find another form that resonates, and then you observe through that. But like maybe, I guess the only explanation I could have for, you know, like not really for myself not buying into the con game is that perhaps we've been here before many times before, and
Sure.
though within our ego constructs we can't put into words why we see these things, but perhaps we've already experienced it before. That's what I think might be happening.
So, do you think it might be fair to say possibly that the, let's say, the minority within the minority has been here for so long, but then the majority of, you know, what we might classify as humans, especially from an external viewpoint on the third dimensional plane, they may have only been here a few times, or maybe even this is their first incarnation, so they jump in straight away, and because things are at the point they are in this incarnation now, that they just get snapped up into the trap like instantaneously. Do you think that could be a possibility?
Well, yeah, because I think the baseline nature of the human avatar is that of collectivism. Like, you know, we if evolution is a thing, like we evolved with, you know, to be in like tribal settings and to be part of the group is a survival advantage. So it sort of makes sense to me, like how just there's an unconscious mechanism that has this kind of trust towards figures of authority. So that it would have been the chieftain or I guess the shaman of the village. But now
Right.
these controllers understand how to herd the base nature of humanity, and I think the only reason why I've been able to see this is because like it's always happening within me. Like I'm always feeling this urge towards that collective program. I feel the social awkwardness. I feel the pain of the ostracization. I feel like the
Yeah.
disconnect. But that's, you know, like I think these people are absorbed into that, and like when I say like I feel, that's just some observer actually just watching the mechanism play out, but it's not actually me. If that
Right.
makes sense.
Yep.
I guess arguably that you could call that the soul, or at least from my perspective, I think that that's what it is, the observer. Perhaps, yeah, like maybe, yeah. I think that this place is a like almost like an airport, like for different.
Mm.
Yeah, because I at least for souls, there's definitely something to that, but you know, I also don't think that all organic portals here, like, or when I say an organic portal, I just mean a sense or some sort of biological sense, not just confined to human avatars, could be any form of life really, but it's like it's all um, like a mental construct or like a density of mind at the end of the day. Like everything is alive in a sense, and then you have these, you know, thought forms and egregores as being collective beings in of themselves that
Mm.
like an ant, you know, an ant hill, like and
Yep.
correspondence, and
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess, I mean, obviously we've already kind of discussed it on and off during this currently, but I'll still ask that in regards to like the times that you speak about organic portals, and it's like from what I've watched and listened to on your channel at the Rebel Foundry, you speak almost like on a scientific aspect in the way that you almost like calculating the way they work, if that makes sense. Is there a possibility that you can maybe expand a little bit on how you figured some of the things that you figured out? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, because I'm a very I've always been like a very like emotionally sensitive person, and I have very deep feelings. But feelings, I kind of felt lacking, sort of intellectually, and I couldn't quite explain to people when I was younger, like why I had felt certain ways and why I had certain intuitions about certain things, because intuition is this kind of, in my opinion, it's like a knowing without a logical chain in order to explain the reasoning behind it. You just kind of know. So I thought, because you know that everyone, I thought everyone was like me. If you could just, if I could just give people information, then they would, it would make sense, because they, like me, were seeking information, were curious about reality. I mean, who wouldn't be curious about this very strange experience we're having? And in some ways it's amazing at the same time as being horrifying. So I really wanted to communicate my intuition. So you know, and then that leads to like reading a lot of books and then trying to kind of articulate all of this you see. And I think being coming from like an engineering background, I'm sort of I have to use a lot of deductive logic to get sort of deep down to the root of the issue. And I feel like there's no other you know, what else is there to do but to delve to the root of the issue, you know? So I wouldn't necessarily call it scientific. I just want to, I feel like it's so difficult to explain this topic that
it's definitely a topic of deep thought.
And I feel like it's there because it's been spoken about for centuries. This I feel like all of the sages and mystics, the one message was that you're really trying to cultivate your minds that exist outside of the cultural like framework. So, but then how do you put that into language? And language really doesn't cut it. Like these spaces go beyond language. But I guess we're trying our best to put out this message. And you know, I learned everything that I learned from other people. You know, listening to podcasts and people who are more articulate than myself. And I guess we're kind of making I wouldn't say an egregore, but like we're all like individual people recognizing that there's certain principles and principalities that govern this reality, and trying to sort of outline the landscape, like on how to find it. Because right information, right decision making, right manifested reality, that sort of thing.
I noticed that for myself, it just seemed like the past few years I found that there just seemed to be more and more possibility that the organic portal or the you know, the NPC as it began on the unfortunately it began on the right wing belief system, but I don't necessarily subscribe to right nor left. But you know, it's just how I discovered it online, and you know, then the more you look into things, you realize that these sort of hypotheses, or if it's considered even a theory, even though I think that it's something actually realistic, it goes back thousands of years to the ancient Gnostics, and they refer to these humans or things, whatever they are, as hylics. And you know, that could be just, that's one possible
Yeah.
way of using a term in, you know, terminology. Or and but yeah, it just seemed to be that the past few years, especially this year, is that the amount has ramped up. Or maybe it's just people like yourself and myself and others that we know have maybe seen the veil being removed much more. So we're like, wow, these things, these people, as we thought they were, you know, soul carrying individuals, are not as they have been. And
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it just seems to be more clear now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, I don't know if I would call them just, like I said before, it's like an aspect of human nature, in my opinion.
Right.
So it's within us as well, but perhaps these people have lost all semblance of individuality, or perhaps it's still there, but it's just barely, the flame is like barely lit, such that you could almost say that they've been
Yeah.
completely taken. And you know, perhaps this is a place where souls become purged. Souls are purged. You know, they return back to the source instead of being individuated for whatever reason. The soul wants to be individuated. I'm not too sure about that
Mm.
myself. But yeah, I feel like this is, you know, because we look at history and the atrocities that's happened through history,
Mm.
especially at the dawn of civilization coming into the like Neolithic periods, like when we came out being nomadic uh, tribes people. Um, like there's just been constant warfare. There's been constant like religious uh, this religious mindset, but um, so I feel like this mechanism has always been in place, and it's been. I guess the question is, what happens in order to bring us to that point of civilization? Was it some kind of intervention, or was it? Is there like a reality hijack? Like what, you know? And I think I've always like I figured it out like 3 years ago that the people that I'm around, they are actually dangerous. Maybe not at the moment, just because they're told to not be dangerous. But war is the most absurd thing to my
Mm.
mind. War is just, to what extent do you have to be pushed in order to say we have to conquer, we have to like kill, or we have to defend ourselves from an enemy that's been created for us? This is just ridiculous. Like, how can you
Right.
even come to that conclusion? But people get they get rolled up into it, and they're literally that's their limit, death. And you know, like that's the most extreme limit. So they will. That's how far this hive mind will like push the avatars that it it you know like uh, it's absorbed into and becomes one with. Um,
Mm.
so it's kind of it really is. I wouldn't say I'm scared, but it's I've got to be very,
Concern.
yeah, around these people. Um, I don't know how you would trigger that individuality. I guess what we're doing is one way of doing that to those who seek the knowledge themselves. but there had to be something there to begin with, because if there wasn't something within me, I would have taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker, you know.
It's like I actually was looking at an article online last night. I came upon some information what's going on up in Canada, and the Canadian government has actually put out literally some information, even for public viewing, that they've started to fund propaganda aspects that actually goes directly towards the Canadian people. And I think it was Dan Dix who had a channel that was recently taken down off YouTube called Press for Truth. He lives in Vancouver in Canada on the West Coast. He was stating that he actually has recently seen just a whole bunch of military tanks just driving down the streets of Vancouver, and the military are actually like hanging over the top on the of the tanks outside, just looking around as they go down the street. And it's just like how do these people like just go, yep, we'll do these things, no questions asked, because we're gonna make the country safe. But how is doing that and like putting fear into the general public, how is that something that you can do without question? Like it's just, it's so like alien to me, and to soul travelers in general, people that carry spirit and soul. It's just like, it's so inconceivable. Like to me, I don't know, what words to put it in, because it's just so, it's yeah, it's just like, we don't want war, like yourself, me, I and I think even like most people in general, even if they're these Hylek types, these organic portals, for the most part, no one specifically wants to go to war. But it's almost like at the drop of a hat, like, do a lot of these people just almost like get programmed like, agents of the Matrix, like that movie Children of the Corn, where they like all of a sudden just stop and their eyes just roll back into their head and they just start marching into like obliteration. Like, I don't know, that's just so nasty.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question that I've been asking my entire life, basically. Like, I realized, like, especially with the soldier things, like when I was very young, like how these people all just seem to be, there's something like very dense about them, like, or there's something very, there's no like spark of individuality, and there's nothing that seems to be animating them other than how, I don't even think they intend for their minds to be created. It just kind of happens. It's like this mechanism. But that's the thing. Like they're so like predictable. Like I've had, because I have these sort of highly acquaintances that I knew from uni, and since things are beginning to ramp up now, I started to like have some friction with them, because I don't normally talk about this stuff. I have only really started coming out because of this virus bullshit, and because they want to bloody stick a needle in my arm, and they're not going to do that. But these people are so predictable. It's not even funny sometimes. So like I have no idea, other than like I feel like, because I definitely know that I am observing my experience, but I don't feel like I'm part of this place or the laws and principles that abide to it. So for me, I definitely feel like there are hyperdimensional conscious or awarenesses that imbue themselves in this place, but I feel like not everyone here is of the same consciousness. Like you got like this Mother Earth consciousness, then there's this demiurge thing, then that can only really utilize entities or 3D entities that have egoic language capabilities, this feedback loop to be able to build a construct because it's based on the construct and shadow
Right.
projection, stuff like that.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
then there's us who we have the demiurge within us, but we also observe the demiurge, but can override some of its programs sometimes. Like us,
Right.
I'm not a perfect being, but that's what you strive towards that. But it's like just by being human makes you fallible, just because it seems to be like that's how this place is designed.
Right. Yeah. I guess one thing you just spoke about then in regards to different consciousness, I found that, you know, there's so many people online, you know, a lot of people that consider themselves spiritual, they portray themselves as this or that, and you know, I mean, each to their own, of course, but a lot of it is collectivist, and there's so many people, even in these alternative communities, and they're far and wide, and they will continually say, this is going on within the collective, or that's going on within the collective, or I can feel the collective this or that. And I mean, even recently, I got into a little commenting back and forth with a young lady in my own social media account. And I basically stated that, well, I personally don't connect with any collectivist groupthink or anything at all, and I've unplugged from any collective in any form, you know, whether it be good or bad. And she just couldn't get her head around what I was saying. It was almost like alien to her. And I stated that I'd unplugged from any form of collective belief and any movement. And I even had other people come into this thread that was actually on her page, and they called me arrogant because I didn't think and agree with the same things. And I just thought, well, you know, there's a difference between being part of a collective and then there's a difference between being an individual, but you can still be an individual but work together in a voluntary aspect. So you can choose to work together in a harmonious sense, but that's not necessarily a collective, because you're not the same. You're your own self. You know, like for me, I don't feel that my origin is this particular planet or this multiple incarnations and however long I've been here. It's just that I've been here for a particular point of time, for whatever reason, but my origins are elsewhere. I've had experiences and I've seen very vivid and clear visions of other realities and other dimensional, you know, existences that I've lived at. But, you know, I just don't think a lot of people really grasp those kinds of things. They think it's just we're part of the collective and that's it. You know, like even David Icke speaks about these kinds of things when he's going out and doing his protests and stuff. He'll talk about the collective and this and that. And I'm like, I get where you're coming from, man, but I'm not really buying it for myself because I'm not part of that. But yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on those things?
Yeah, well, I think I just feel like collectivism and this religious mindset of, you know,
Yeah,
being part of something, that's, you know, that's just part of this place. But if you're not from this place, then it doesn't affect you. And
exactly. Yeah.
the, I guess the intensity of how detached you are from the space, or how much you realise you're detached from the place, sort of would dictate to what effect it has on you. And I think that there's like these truther groups, or these new agey groups. It's a step off of the main treadmill, you know, the mainstream
Right.
treadmill. is coming out of it. And then obviously these, I feel like the orchestrators of this reality, they understand that some people will do that, so they've like conveniently set up certain like it's kind of like you have the main meat processing plants where like factory farmed animals in the mainstream, but then you come out and then you get like a free range ranch
Yep.
with like grass and stuff, but there's still fences constructed there. So the grass represents some of the truth that they spill out to us, but
Yeah.
we're still fenced within their paradigm to a certain extent. And I
Yep.
guess it just seems to be the nature of this place for us to be that way. But if you're not from this place, then it's kind of
Sure.
like you become a glitch in the
Yep.
matrix. And I guess I've always like people say there's a danger to being too open-minded, but I don't really see it that way, because if you've got discernment, then you can definitely like separate what's good and what's bad. And I look at everything, but and I don't disregard the person just because they have a certain. It's kind of like the David Icke. Uh, all people know about him in the mainstream is some lizard guy. He's like a anti-Semite to whatever he does. They don't really understand what Zionism is, etc., etc. But like they've always. So, well, hang on a second. Like, I don't know this. Like, that's just been given to me. I don't agree with everything he says, but there's certain things that he says which likewise I wouldn't necessarily agree with everything that you would say, and I expect you to be the same with me. But we can certainly have a there's benefit to not just throwing something off. There's and you can explore a range of different ideas and never commit to them. But yeah, it's when those reactions you got from your social media account is when people actually identified with their free range farm because they think that they've got the gold. So
Right. It's almost like I've heard before, and I don't know, how accurate it is, but it's almost like people wake up from the matrix, but they don't realize they've just woken up into another matrix, and then they wake out of that matrix into another matrix, and it's just like there's like a box within a box within a box, and they just have to keep punching out of each particular box. But that's where it comes into like doing the inner work of self-mastery, shadow work, whatever you want to call it. Some people only go a certain portion of the way, but it's important to go continually, just keep punching through those boxes. And the more you do that, the more you realize, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. And that's where, there's a difference between some people and the majority of others that sort of just come out of one aspect, and then that's kind of the end of it. They just come out and they find a little bit of information, and then they just sort of stay in a cycle.
Yeah, I mean, it's all like energy conservation at the end of the day. It's like the the ego wants to solidify and then protect that solidification. It wants to inherit a worldview. And then, like it's kind of the common trends between this waking up into different layers of the matrix is that religious mindset of like, oh, now I've got the gold, and now like, everything else doesn't need my discernment, and now they can create my mind for me. These people step off the treadmill first had something that got them to ask the question, whereas the people in the mainstream, they just don't really seem to ask any questions at all.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of like then once you do that, then you assume that everything else that follows from this new matrix you found yourself in is the truth, and then the same mechanism applies, and then they got you. But that's not to say that there isn't like objective laws here, and that you should just say that nothing is true. I think that there definitely is an objective truth Yeah, but that comes
Yep.
from an actual knowing and not a belief, because there's a difference between knowing and belief, isn't there?
Absolutely. And that's what I've said a lot. Yep.
Um, so yeah, and it's a very, I find it such a slippery slope getting on top of what's built into us by
Yep.
whoever orchestrated this place. Um, it's like we're just built to fall into that religious mindset, and it's very time consuming to do research, to like educate yourself, to do the shadow work, as you say. It's very
Yeah.
takes a lot of energy,
Yeah.
people don't do that. A lot of
Yep.
pain as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's why people don't really want to do it, because there's fear. And hey, I can completely grasp that, because it's damn hard. And that's the thing. That's why some roads people just don't want to go down. And
Yeah.
speaking of that, uh, just in general, with the current state of things in the UK at the moment, how are you personally coping? Like, how are you going?
Well, I don't wear like any masks going on public transport or
Yep.
what have you, and I've got an asthma inhaler, and I'm thinking about printing out like an official looking pass thing saying that I'm like whatever. I'm exempt, because that's another thing, you can kind of hack the mechanism, because they obviously respect things that look like an authority
Right.
symbol. Just give them an authority symbol, and it's like that. It's kind of like and like the hive mind is so easy to trigger. It's like the other day I was on London transport, and like everyone was just queuing down this one barrier, like to get through into the system. And there was this other gate there, and no one was using it. And I was just like, let's do an experiment here. If I go through this gate, like just watch the people will follow. And then I did it,
Right.
and everyone else did it. And it's just, I'm just having, I'm just kind of hacking the principles.
Hmm.
Where it like, I guess the only time I'd have to start being concerned is when they make the vaccines mandatory. Although I don't know if they would actually be able to pull that through.
I think in that regard, I I don't think it's going to be mandatory per se, but it's going to be heavily propagated, and it's going to
Yeah.
be heavily pushed, and it's going to be glorified, but they're going to try and put certain regulations on people that don't get it. Like, it's going to be
Yeah.
like they're going to be labeled as this or that, and they're going to try and make things difficult. I don't really know how successful it's going to be, because from what I've been looking at and thinking about, even though a lot of people I don't necessarily agree with in regards to, let's say, these truther movements, they're still saying no, not for me, ain't gonna happen. So there is a lot of, like, a lot of pushback against that side of it. So that may be a positive thing in that regard. It's just a matter of, and I hate to say this, but it's sort of like a matter of how many people will cave in when it comes to, like, push comes to shove. How many will just cave in and just, throw their hands up and go, "Oh, I'm defeated." Because I know that a lot of people will do that, but you know, what's that thing that they say in the United States, which I kind of completely agree with? Liberty or death. That's what I think.
Yeah.
So
I'm all with
yeah,
that too. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. And I don't think we even need. Even though it's true that the majority does manifest reality. Like if a lot of
right,
them by this religious sentiment, then we only need a certain threshold of the population to be on board with the truth and objective morality. I think it's like, you can go by like the 20/80 rule, like we only need 20% of the people who do 80% of the work, and then 80% of the people do 20% of the thinking. So and it's like yeah. So what they're trying to do with the mandatory vaccine stuff is to create a value system, because people don't seem to have an internal sense of morality. So they have their values given to them. That's how these police officers and soldiers think that they're all the following is a virtue. And it's like yeah, like they'll just construct a paradigm around that, say that you need to do this to protect your friends and family. They're already doing that with the COVID NHS app. Their slogan is to keep your friends and family safe. You need to get the app, and that's just Edward Benet's advertising. You know, they will associate a primal instinct, whether it be like sex, foods, safety, what have you, and then put it with the product. And it's just like, oh yeah, that's just so obvious. That's what they're doing. But with regards to you saying that you don't think it would be mandatory, I think that you're definitely right there. But they will kind of subtly do it, kind of like what they do with the Chinese citizen point system. Or I think Chinese credit system. I think that's what it's called, where you get like a certain rank based on how much of a little you know, little, just a schoolboy who follows the orders from his teacher.
Sure.
So we would get essentially ostracized and locked out of using services, and I guess that's how they sort of, it wouldn't be coercion per se, but it's kind of like a subtle coercion.
It's like a threat of force. It starts with the threat of force, and then it moves to actual coercive force directly, you know, whether it gets to that or not. But yeah.
It's what David Icke called it the totalitarian tiptoe.
Right.
They just you know, they push one thing and then people accept it because it's not so much of a huge change, and then they push the next step and then they go another step forwards. And people, because people have like short-term memory, notice how, like, you know, you've got to think about it, like the same people who orchestrated the wars in the Middle East, like weapons of mass destruction, they're the same bloody people who are running the country now. It's
right.
It's a joke, but people, and it's internationally known that this, you know, that was just a whole bunch of war crimes, but people can't seem to make the connection because they have this, like, they only see what's presented to them, and they can't see, there's no observer that you know, can just connect the dots. So yeah, it's just they'll keep pushing and pushing, and that's how these people can get coerced to doing atrocities like what happened in the Holocaust or anything like that. And I don't know, man. It's just it's a very strange world we live in.
Absolutely. I just wanted to point out it's actually coming up to the hour, but in closing, I just wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, I'd like to link your channel in the description below. But how can people contact you if you're interested in that, and what would be the best way if you would like to converse with other soul travelers that are interested in the information you put out and such?
Yeah, I mean, I have an email, the rebelfoundry@gmail.com, and I'm willing to set up like Skype calls or phone calls, add people's social media if they wish, but please get in contact with me through that means first.
Okay.
And yeah, like I'm very very honoured to be featured on your channel, and
oh, you're welcome. Yep.
It's been a very enjoyable interview.
But yeah, no, okay. Well, I'll link those things in the description as well if you're okay with that. And yeah, thanks very much for having a chat with me. And I hope that in the future that maybe we'll be able to do this again.
Yeah. Well, we can maybe think of like specific topics and then go from there. Go deeper into various topics that we've outlined here. I'm sure people will be interested in hearing about that stuff in more detail.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, N, Thanks
Right.
very much for that, and I'll speak to you soon.
Lovely. Take care.
Bye.